In the fiery heart of Mount Doom, the One Ring met its end, and with it, the physical form of Sauron was obliterated in a violent, world-shaking collapse. But make no mistake, this was not the death of a mortal villain, it was the unraveling of a god. Sauron, once the Lord of the Rings, a being forged in the thought of Unravelled himself, did not simply die. His spirit, ancient and malignant, was flung outward like a scream from the abyss. The skies darkened, the earth heaved, a towering shadow surged into the heavens, crowned in lightning, grasping toward the world it had once ruled, then was torn away by a wind not of this world. He had been defeated, yes, but not destroyed, not completely. For what becomes of an immortal will that refuses to fade? What terror lies in a spirit too hateful to vanish, too broken to rebuild? This was no ordinary fall. This was the collapse of a nightmare, unfinished, restless, and watching. As the towers of Barad-dûr crumbled and the Black Gate fell, the world rejoiced, but in the silence that followed, a question trembled on the wind: where did the shadow go? And will it ever return? Sauron was never meant to know the weight of flesh. He was born of fire and thought, a mere spirit shaped in the mind of Unravelled, untouched by hunger, pain, or mortality. Yet, as centuries unfurled, he grew enchanted not by beauty, not by goodness, but by power made tangible. He donned form after form, each more terrible or beguiling than the last. At first, it was merely a tool, a way to deceive, to command, to crush. But slowly, imperceptibly, the tool became a cage. With each incarnation, his spirit sank deeper into the body he shaped. The dark armor, the towering stature, the piercing eyes, they became more than illusions. They became a habit, and like any habit, they became a need. This dependency was Sauron's slow damnation. The physical world, once beneath him, seduced him with its vivid sensations, taste, touch, dominance. And binding himself so tightly to flesh, he tethered his divine nature to the very world he sought to dominate. And when his body was destroyed, first in the downfall of Numenor, then at the hands of the last alliance, he found returning to form more difficult, more agonizing each time. What once took years now took centuries. His spirit, once swift and fluid, had become sluggish, dragged down by the memory of pain, by the love of flesh. By the time of the War of the Ring, Sauron could no longer wear beauty. He could no longer walk among men with a deceiver's smile. He was only the eye, formless, flaming, and fixed. In his hubris, he had bound himself too tightly to the material world. And like Melkor before him, Sauron learned too late that the more a spirit grasps for control through flesh, the more it becomes a prisoner to it. His power became his prison, his form, his final weakness. In the aftermath of his final defeat, Sauron did not die, he was undone. As the One Ring melted into the fires of Mount Doom, his power shattered, and what remained of his essence tore through the skies in a last, terrible display. Witnesses described it as a vast shadow crowned with lightning, a monstrous silhouette rising above the Black Gate, stretching out a hand not in triumph, but in desperation. That hand, once feared across continents, reached for a world that no longer feared it. It was the gesture of a god in ruin, a being robbed of substance, flailing in the winds of his own destruction. And then, as if the very breath of the Valar had stirred, a great wind came, not howling, not violent, but final. It swept the shadow away, like smoke stripped from fire, like a scream snuffed out before its echo could return. In that moment, Middle-earth held its breath. Was it over? Could something so ancient, so powerful, be banished so easily? The silence that followed was not peace, it was the hush of unease, the awareness that something had been lost, but not fully destroyed. For what had truly died that day? Only a shape, only a mask. The spirit that once bent nations to its will now drifted silent, formless, furious, and that is the horror that lingers. Not that Sauron was defeated, but that he became something less than flesh, and yet more terrifying, a presence without a body, a will without a voice, an ancient malice that could no longer be seen, only felt. He had become the dread in the corners of the world, the cold breath on a warrior's neck, the echo of command with no speaker. He was a ghost not gone, only waiting, waiting in the shadows. The One Ring was never just a trinket of gold, it was a vessel of unspeakable power, a prison of will, a fragment of Sauron's soul forged into solid form. When he created it in the fires of Mount Doom, he did not simply craft a tool, he poured himself into it, threading his essence into every curve, every whisper of magic that pulsed within. It was the crowning achievement of his cunning. With it, he could dominate the bearers of the other rings, bending the might of elves, dwarves, and men to his unyielding will. But that triumph came at a devastating price. For in that act of creation, Sauron chained himself to a single, fragile object. His greatest strength became the very root of his weakness. As long as the ring endured, so did Sauron. Even when he was struck down in battle or cast into ruin, the ring anchored him, allowed his spirit to smolder in the shadows, licking its wounds and waiting to rise again. But the bond worked both ways. When the ring was destroyed, so too was the foundation of his power. His soul was split, incomplete, incapable of regeneration. It wasn't just that he lost a magical artifact. He lost a piece of himself that could never be reclaimed. This was the flaw at the heart of his genius, the fatal thread in his tapestry of conquest. Sauron had made the ring his heart, but in doing so, he handed fate the dagger, and when Frodo, through pain and sacrifice, cast that dagger into the fire, it didn't just end an age, it ended a being. Without the ring, Sauron became a wound that could not heal, a scream that could never be voiced again. The Lord of the Rings had become a shadow in search of a heart that no longer beat. Though his body was gone and the ring destroyed, Sauron's spirit did not vanish, it lingered. Stripped of form, he became a shadow without substance, a will without voice, drifting like a bitter memory across the remnants of a world he once sought to command. He could no longer manifest towers, armies, or terror with the flick of a thought, yet still, he was. Somewhere in the forgotten corners of Middle-earth, or perhaps even closer, his essence clings to the cracks in reality, not living, but not truly dead, a remnant of hate, gnawing at the edges of existence. Imagine it, a presence you cannot see but feel, a cold draft where none should be, a whisper behind the door when you know you're alone. That's the curse of Sauron now, powerless to shape the world, but not powerless to loathe it. And in that loathing, he endures, for an immortal spirit forged in control and domination. To be reduced to a voiceless echo is torment deeper than death. Gandalf warned that Sauron would become a mere spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows, and in this state, he watches as the free peoples rebuild, watches as joy, laughter, and love take root in a world no longer his. It is his final punishment to be trapped outside the world he longed to rule, helpless and bitter, a forgotten god snarling behind the veil of peace. Perhaps you felt it, that creeping dread with no source, that chill in the bones when the night feels to still. Could it be him, a remnant of the great shadow, clawing through the cracks of time, cursing every light he cannot extinguish? He is no longer a dark lord, he is something worse, he is a ghost. And he hates you for living. Some say that Sauron's spirit was not merely scattered, but banished, cast out of the circles of the world, flung into the timeless, starless void where Morgoth, his master, had already fallen. This place is not death, nor sleep, nor silence. It is unbeing, a realm beyond Arda, beyond light, beyond form. An eternal absence where no sun rises, no thought echoes, and no memory is born. To be sent there is to be unmade, to drift forever in a prison of nothingness. If this was Sauron's final fate, then it was not a clean destruction, but a descent, one last spiral into darkness deeper than any the world has known. In the Silmarillion, the Eldar speak of Sauron as a shadow of Morgoth and a ghost of his malice, walking the same ruinous path down into the void. It is a chilling image, not of Sauron's defeat, but of his continuation. A shadow following another, eternal and unfinished. Imagine them there together, Morgoth, the first tyrant, and Sauron, his echo locked in a frozen place outside time, their hatred too great for even the world to contain. But is this lore truth or merely a myth whispered by elves to make sense of what they cannot destroy? We cannot be sure. The void is unknowable. Tolkien never settled its mysteries. Perhaps Sauron does dwell there now, a phantom clawing at the walls of existence. Or perhaps the phrase followed him into the void is poetic, not literal, a metaphor for a spirit consumed by its own darkness. Either way, the thought lingers like smoke in a sealed room. If Sauron remains in the void, then he is not gone. He waits, not in fire or flesh, but in emptiness, listening for the crack in the world through which he might someday return. The world rejoices in peace, believing evil has been vanquished, but history, especially in Middle-earth, rarely offers such clean endings. For even as the black gate crumbled and Sauron's eye was extinguished, a deeper truth whispered through the ashes. Evil does not die, it waits. It slips into cracks, hides in memory, and watches through the eyes of the forgotten. Sauron may be gone in form, but the echo of his will still coils through the fabric of Arda, not as a king or conqueror, but as a warning. A reminder, a shadow lurking just behind the light. Gandalf said it best. If the ring had survived, if Sauron had reclaimed it, all hope would have been lost. His victory would have been absolute, and that is what chills the soul, not that he was defeated, but that the line between victory and annihilation was so razor-thin, one misstep, one weakness, and the world would have been cast into an age of despair from which it may never have returned. That's the restlessness that lingers. Because evil like Sauron's doesn't vanish, it transforms. Perhaps another will rise, not with a flaming eye but with a silver tongue, a subtle corruption, a hunger for power dressed as righteousness. The ring is gone, yes, but the desire it awakened, the thirst for control, for dominion that is eternal, it lives in the hearts of men, waiting for the right whisper, the right war, the right lie. So remember this, peace is precious, but it is never permanent. Every age has its shadows, and every victory must be guarded. Because the darkness doesn't sleep, it remembers. And somewhere in the cracks of the world and the corners of our hearts, the ghost of Sauron may yet be stirring, watching, waiting, whispering. From his divine origins to his final, fragmented state, Sauron's story is not merely one of power, but of obsession, downfall, and eternal unrest. Each stage of his existence reveals a spirit consumed by control, one that bound itself to flesh, to a ring, to the very world it sought to dominate, and even in defeat. He lingers either in the void with Morgoth or as a restless echo in the shadows of Middle-earth. His tale is a chilling reminder that evil, though defeated, is never fully gone. It watches, it waits, and it teaches us that peace must always be guarded.